Okay, today we're going to be talking about these cute little flowers that we use on our tabletop Della. They will also be a similar flower that will be used in our folk stitch in October, and the name of that one is Hopak. So if you are into these little flowers like this, we're going to show a little bit of tips and tricks on how to make them look beautiful. So I've backstitched through the leaves, I've backstitched right along this edge of the inner circle of the flower, and now I'm ready to do the outer fancy stitching. So in your kit you will be choosing the thread that you need. The thread that we have sent with Della is this lovely pinky purple fuchsia, and if you haven't done this before or have not known, you can just grab a hold of one of these threads on the back and pull it through, and the whole thing will stay intact. You can just pull one out, but I don't want to mess up Courtney's thing here by doing that. But so you'll be using the purple 0521. So actually it's an O, not a 0. 0521. So that's, but I'm going to use this light lavender just so the camera will pick it up better. And we'll put a little knot on it. And what I have found on when doing these deep blanket stitching, it's really nice to use a little thread wax. So this is the Granny's Legacy Granny's Thread-tastic, and I just pull the thread through one time is all I ever need. And if your thread wax is really hard, you can always put a little dot of water in there, depending on the humidity level at this time of year. Depends on how hard your thread wax, because it is a natural product. So I like to work left to right like I write, and I start right here on the edge, and I'm going to make blanket stitching that goes all the way to the center of the color. So I just start and just I kind of think of this like a ray. So I'm always kind of aiming towards this dot here. So if my needle were laying down there, then my next stitch would go here. And I just do like rays out from the center. And they can be pretty close together or a little farther apart, depending on however you wish to do it. But I'm always kind of aiming towards that center spot of the flower. And it just makes a beautiful thread painting on top of the crown of this flower. It kind of reminds me of the asters in fall. And so this purpley blue is a lovely contrast to a lot of our oranges and browns and golds that we have in the fall. It also can be purple is kind of year-round, so it doesn't necessarily scream one season or another. Now on our Hopak folk stitch that's coming out, those are going to be orange, and the thread work on that again will just really make those crowns pop. And so I'm coming to the end here, and you can see how quickly and easily that goes, what easy stitching it is. Just like that, and we're finished. So that is the stitching, the blanket stitching on that part of the fancy purple aster flower. I believe, did we do colonial knots or colonial?
I don't remember.
We did a line of chain stitching, or so follow your pattern for the rest of those stitches, but we just wanted to give you a little heads up on how to do those flowers and how easy and beautiful that looks. The other stitching that is very much similar is the green leaf, and what you're going to want to do there is to add a stitching line. So I'm going to take and just draw in a stitching line here, and each one can be a little different, it doesn't really matter. So there I have a stitching line, and while that dries I'm going to thread my needle. And once again, I'm using a different color thread to show up for camera. You will be using on your design I believe it's P2.
Yep.
It's a darker green variegated, but in the interest of letting the camera pick up the colors, we're going to be doing it with this light color green. So you really need to wait for that to dry. We'll blow a little bit on it. And I like to start at this point and connect it to the stem. So my first stitch actually is coming up in the chain stitching that you've done. And then I chose to do tiny little stitches along this edge, because they're really not, they're just kind of holding that edge down. They're not really there to be part of the thread work. So I go along here with tiny little blanket stitches. And then when I get to the top, when I start the fancy stitching, it's going to be the same thing as the purple flower. So I think I can get one more in here, and then I'm going to start going around here. And once again, I kind of choose kind of a center point, so these turn into rays going around, and I'm stitching all the way to my drawn line. Is the camera picking that up?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And these stitches can be a little closer together too, I think. They add a little interest if they're closer together. But of course, it's your piece. You can do whatever you'd like. I'm going quite close together here. And once you can see by putting that thread wax on your thread, I'm not having all those knots and curls that you would normally get when you're doing these long stitches. Your thread likes to curl and knot up at that point. So if you haven't tried some thread wax, now is a good time to see how you come out with it. So as I go around here, I still, you're going to have to go tinier together on this side than you are on this side to make this big curve. They're almost side by side on the inside to make that curve. And back down. And these now, I kind of like to have them go, down for a ways before I start raying back. So I'm going to have them not be quite so close together here and the inside, and just kind of follow through along on that edge. I didn't allow my white iron off pen to dry, so it's wearing off. If you would have patience and allow that to dry, it won't rub off like mine did. So I'm out of thread. I'm going to re-thread and come back, because we're going to do a chain stitch down the spine of that. Should have had 2 needles here, but about 18 inches of thread is all I ever start with. Any longer than that, your thread wears out before you use it up, and your stitches won't look as even. Once again, I'm going to choose to put a little thread wax on that. Straightens out the thread, keeps it from being naughty. Come back up on the outside, right inside the stitch you just finished. And you won't even know that you stopped and started there. So as I go down, I can either go down, keep going on that same slant, or I can twist a little bit. Let's just keep going on the same slant. I think that would look interesting. A lot of things you can just do artistically by how you feel at the time. Or you can look at your picture and the pattern. Katie makes really nice pictures in the pattern to see how the stitches look. I just have one or two more left here, I think. I think that's it. Leave a little room for the chain stitching. So now we've done all the way around, and we need to go back along this spine with the chain stitch. So once again, I'm going to start right inside the chain so it kind of connects. It looks like a leaf stem, and these chain stitches will be pretty tiny. My point came up a little bit, but I'll work it underneath the chain. And just work that chain right up the spine. And I try not to pay attention to the stitching, the blanket stitching. I try to make my chain stitch be, each stitch to be about the same size. I just ignore the blanket stitching. Otherwise, I can get in the habit of trying to make the chain stitching matching the blanket stitching, and those stitches can be farther apart or closer together, and so your chain won't look as even. So I just concentrate on making each chain stitch be about the same length. And when you come to a curve for a chain stitch, you may have to adjust and make your chains a little bit tinier to follow around that curve. Otherwise, they might look a little hexagonal. They might have straights instead of curves. But usually that chain will follow right around quite nicely on a curve. Katie uses a lot of chain stitching on her lettering on her dish towels, and it just turns out beautifully because it does curve so easily around. We're almost finished here. I'm going to go clear to the end so you can see how we connect the end to. See how those stitches were a little closer together when I was in that tight curve. Now we're coming to the point here, and I just do one more to connect it to the edge. I feel that that chain stitching needs to connect right over the edge of the piece. And there you have it. All set for your tabletop hot dish this month. So thank you for joining us here at Granny's Legacy Patterns.